This year we're kicking off Worlds by introducing Global Power Rankings, powered by AWS. This is a ranking of all teams in Tier 1 League of Legends Esports. The goal is to highlight team strength across all regions, creating bragging rights for the best of the best, and better contextualizing competitive play, now and into future seasons. Global Power Rankings are calculated against two main areas of performance: team match results and regional strength. Three distinct indexes affect the weighting of overall match results: margin of victory, strength of opponent, and the context in which matches take place. In a best-of-5 series, a clean 3-0 victory is more impactful than winning a match 3-2. Taking down a team with a high power score will always be more impactful than beating a team with a lower power scores. International play is scored at a premium and weighted heavier than regional split action. So, for example, Worlds Knockouts wins would count for more than regional playoff wins. Since most games throughout the year are played within regions, power rankings leverage regional strength scores informed by international results. As a region does well internationally, all teams within that region will see a net rise. The opposite is true if that region struggles on the big stage. Keep an eye out for Global Power Rankings powered by AWS throughout Worlds 2024, and check lolesports.com for an up-to-date rankings list.
Awesome. Love that little intro video. But Nick and Ashwin, let's get into the nitty gritty here. First and foremost, right? You said the starting point was ELO. I'm not going to lie, I had no idea what ELO was, and I hope that some people, it's not just me, some people in our audience might not know what it is. What is ELO, and why was that the starting point for creating these rankings?
Sure, yeah, I touched on it before, but yeah, it's the reason we chose that is it's a tried and true methodology of calculating the relative skill levels of two opponents in zero-sum games. The system, you basically bring a certain amount of points to the table. You basically wager those points, and the system then estimates the expected outcome of that, and then it scales up the number of points wagered based on the importance of that match, which we, as the developers of the system, determined ourselves, and we did ample amount of testing to figure out exactly what that sweet spot is, and that is now one of the levers that we get to pull to basically optimize around predictive accuracy of the system. So that at a high level is the ELO system. Happy to go into variables as well if that's where you want to take it next.
Yeah, I think that's just good to know the starting point. Like a player rated 100 points higher than their opponent should win like 5 out of 8. Like that's kind of how it works, right?
Exactly.
Like 5 out of 8 games. So if you beat somebody higher ranked than you, basically don't get any points. If you lose to someone lower ranked than you, that's a bigger impact. Good summary. Okay.
It works by like standard deviations, right? Like the higher your ELO is.
Don't take me back to AP stats, Ashwin.
Yeah, the higher ELO is, the less people have that ELO. So you will then be wagering against people with lower ELO than you. So to maintain a high ELO is rather difficult, and it gets harder and harder as your ELO gets higher and higher. Again, because there's less people competing at that level, and that same concept can be extended to League of Legends, right? Like there's a ladder, there's a bunch of people competing. Towards the top, there's less players, so ELO actually fits very well for that setup.
It's one of those things that's really tough for a high-performing team to stay king of the hill. When you are the top dog, every opponent that you go against brings their A game. You are their Super Bowl when they play against you, because they know the stakes that are on the table. So to maintain that level of excellence is really, really something that you shouldn't think lightly about.
Yeah, definitely. I always love the underdog story, and you're right. If I'm playing somebody that I know is higher ranked than me, I'm going to play way harder, like pull out all the stops to beat them, right? Exactly. So let's get into a little bit more. Let's build on that ELO. So I know in the video we talked about some of the variables that we took into account when creating this. If you've got any ideas in the chat, maybe things that we should take into account in future iterations of these rankings, drop your ideas in there. I think it was this visual. Let's talk about everything that we took into account when making this. I think, Nick, you'll be able to speak to this pretty well. What variables, when Riot was making this, did we have to take into account when creating the GPR?
Totally. Yeah, the first one that isn't explicitly on this visual is the amount of training data that we wanted to take into account. How far back in our LoL Esports history do we want to go to establish our cold start rankings? And this was a This was one of the hardest challenges, to be honest. Not great when you're starting with your first variable is really a hard decision to make. And that the reason why was we wanted to get a large enough sample set of international matches, understanding that we only have 2 major international tournaments a year. So that already sort of handcuffs us a little bit to, we need to extend that time horizon long enough such that we get a statistically significant sample. But we also can't look back too far such that the rosters of those teams are no longer representative of that team's current form. So that, anyone who follows professional esports knows, for better or for worse, roster changes are something that happen quite frequently.
Very often.
Very, very often. That is something from the outset that we decided we were not going to tackle for V1. It is something that I'm really excited to talk about as a future potential enhancement, and there are lots of ways, and I'm curious to hear if anyone in the chat or online has any ideas for how to tackle that. I have some that I won't spoil just yet, that perhaps we'll get into in a couple of minutes. But aside from training data, that was really the first hurdle to clear. The second one was the context of play, as we're showing here. It's the third one under the team match results score. That's really within the ELO formula. That is the K factor. So how are you scaling the amount of points that get wagered per game? So at a high level, what we determined was that regional play would get the lowest match importance. Play-ins would get higher than that. Swiss and then subsequent knockout rounds would get higher than that. And then ultimately grand finals is the highest match importance factor that we have. The last one that we took into account, which is on this screen as well, is the regional strength score, and basically league strength. That, I think, is the major differentiator between the system we developed and how FIFA thinks about their world rankings. Really, FIFA, for their international world rankings, it's at the country level, right? A lot of people said, well, why don't you just copy pasta what they do, really? That doesn't really work for us because we are more akin to professional European soccer leagues and the UEFA Champions League, in that we have various regional leagues, whether it be Bundesliga, wink, wink, AWS, English Premier League, La Liga, my favorite European soccer league. So we have all these various teams competing in these different leagues where the top dogs in those leagues ultimately get bids to compete in these coveted events, be it the Champions League or their sort of second tier, the Europa. So we took that as inspiration and ended up creating this league strength modifier, which is really a means of us then developing this weighted average metric we named the power score. And so we calculated these regional strengths by generating a cold start ELO for each of these leagues, leveraging their average international final standing over the last 4 years. So I know that's kind of a mouthful, but really what that really means is that of the LCK teams, of the Korean teams that played in Worlds and MSI over the last 4 years, on average, they get 4th place, right? Okay. That is the highest average final standing per league that we found. The lowest was one of our smaller regions. They ended up, on an average of around 15 or 16 was their final placement. So we leveraged this to create that cold start, and then we ran. We leveraged our training data over the last 3 years to land where we are right now, looking at these regional strengths that are on the screen in front of us. We understood that there were going to be some sort of confounding issues that we caught from creating this system, be it the main one being that each league has a different number of bids that they get to these tournaments. So, a Korean team that ends up winning Worlds gets washed out by a Korean team that places 6th, for instance. So you might have won Worlds that year, hailing from Korea, but your average ranking ends up being a little bit lower versus a team like PSG out of PCS that is most of the time the sole representative from PCS. So they don't get sort of the impact of having another compatriot playing with them to offset wherever they land and help that average. So there's a little bit of things that we need to accommodate there for in the future. But at a high level, we loved this starting point. It enabled us to create this power score methodology, which ultimately ends up rewarding teams for performance in strong regions. So, the top dogs in LCK having a high win percentage in Korea or in China means that you're probably going to land somewhere in the top 15 versus so it enabled us to do that for really strong teams. It also enabled us to normalize any sort of dominance in our what we would call our minor region. So for a PSG Talon who wins almost 80% of their games, how do we combat this sort of escape velocity that they would get on their ELO ranking, where they would end up at almost 2,000, the top of the scale, when we know that when it comes to international play, that isn't always how it shakes out. So that was how we landed at this sort of blended metric.
And Nick, just to put it into context for the viewers, right? The last 10 plus years of League of Legends World Championship has been won by either a Korean or Chinese team. So that, having those data points in mind, and the data that went into the model is only the last 3 years, but like us as fans of League of Legends and just kind of being in the space, we can contextualize this information across the entire, life of League of Legends esports, and then kind of give a gut check on these models so that we know what's going out to fans and players is correct, or maybe correct isn't the right word, but we can have some justification for why it is the way it is. And another cool thing I wanted to add is the outcome for creating those the regional strength indexes is, it's just another point of discourse for the past 12 years of League esports. People have been debating who's better, North America or Europe, right? Now we have data again, right? We have a number.
That is definitely North America, right? I think.
I don't know about historically, but we're in North America right now, so it's World Champion time, World Championship season. So I think that means Team Liquid's gonna beat G2.
Yeah, it looks like you guys got a little fan club forming too. At Chit Tick says y'all need your own show to talk about esports stats. So
I like it,
guys. I'm a little sad. She left the Nick ambiguous. I'm gonna say it was both of us, Nick. Yeah.
We ride together, we die together, us Knicks, right?
Yeah, 101 and the same. Pretty much,
But while we're on the topic, I think it's a good point because I can't see the chat. I don't know if anyone has any opinions on some of the variables that we didn't include. But I'd like to just touch on some of those right now to indicate to our fans and players that they are on our mind, just because we did not launch with these already baked in, right?
Yeah.
So the first one that we did, what we outright chose not to incorporate, was meta resilience. ELO has a recency bias built into it already, so we didn't feel the need to necessarily bake that into the model from the outset. So that was point one. It's something that we're looking into for next year, perhaps creating a derived score out of it that speaks to someone's meta resilience over the course of a season. That's point one. Point two, that I think was something that came up from our hackathons that we are excited about exploring, is the notion of stomp factors. So in a best of three series, not all 2-0s are created equal. There are a world in which you have a 2-0 that ends in 15 or 20 minutes and the kill count is 10-2. I feel badly for our 100 Thieves compatriots that suffered that fate this past Sunday to PSG. Shout out to PSG with an awesome performance there. So there's a lot of runway we have to think about that, especially building off of the work that we did on win probability and some of the iterations we've been doing there, and thinking about how a total win probability, the integral of that to take you back to calculus, could start to be normalized into a stomp factor. So that's something we're really excited about. The last one I'll touch on there is individual performance. There are some hackathon submissions that over-indexed on that. That's something that's quite difficult to do because we know there are so many in-game stats that we get for free out of the game server. The trouble there is landing on something that is standardized enough that you can consistently track as a metric that determines a player's performance. So there's a world in which we think about win probability added per player, right, as a means of eventually helping us solve the roster change problem to get at something like a wins above replacement, which the MLB does very well. So there's a lot of space that a lot of runway that we can continue going down. And we are really excited to hear from our fans and players how they think about it. I know y'all have a survey. We have a survey that's going live shortly on LOL Esports /GPR. It might already be live. Please let your opinions be known. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah, guys, this is a great chance, for the fans watching today. Like, you got Nick's ear. So drop some comments, do the survey, let him know exactly why, he did a great job or a horrible job, depending on where your team's ranked.
Don't pull any punches. I won't take it personally.
Yeah, we want to hear it.
Ashwin, kind of more for you. So, Nick, you gave a great overview of kind of what we took into account, what we, are looking to take into account in the future. Ashwin, from the tech side from AWS, then, can you give us an overview of how this actually works?
Yeah. From a really high level, right? The World Championship happens at different locations all across the world. This year, it's the finals is held in London at the O2 Arena. So there's a game server that's sitting physically at that arena that the players are playing on. But that game server emits a message out, I think, every second, which is called basically the live stats API. So live stats is basically just a message that gets sent by the game server, which contains information about, what champions are people playing, who's in the game, what teams are playing, what is the state of the match, how many kills does a particular player have, who's dead, who's alive, who's knocked up, all those different things, right? So that information gets collected on a second by second basis and sent to the cloud. So once it's in the cloud, that's where all the magic happens. And that's where we can use some cloud automation and cloud compute services like AWS Lambda to pull that information and place it into an environment that has the capability to basically just do data science on all of this data. So Riot uses one of AWS's partners called Databricks to essentially house the algorithm and crunch the numbers. So after every game, all those live stats messages are bundled up and sent out and processed by Databricks so that we get a new power ranking after that match. And then at the end of a day's play, so after all the matches complete, for a day of Worlds, Riot then publishes out the new global power rankings table, and then you as a fan can go see, and if you kind of drill down into a particular team, you can see their GPR over time. So that's one of the things we are expecting, or one of the ways we're expecting fans to interact with the GPR service is to, take a look after the day's matches are complete and see where your favorite teams end up, and again, create discourse around that event and what you feel about it.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I summarize well, because I want to give a shout out to the teams and the services that obviously make this possible. I think you said Databricks, but also Lambda, I think S3, so simple. Oh my goodness, forget the simple storage service. Yeah. I always mess that up and want to say solution instead of service. And Lambda RDS, Relational Database Service, and S3. So 3 of the kind of hallmark AWS services. Apologies to the S3 team for me stumbling on the acronym there, but very cool stuff. You guys, want to get started and play around with those, like I said, create your own little power ranking for your office, nothing bad can come of that.
So, but quickly, Nick, maybe I'll just explain those components really briefly. So the S3 bucket is kind of used to house the data after the matches end. And then Databricks is where all the information is calculated and all the numbers are crunched. And then RDS is where all that data is persisted. So that way, any consumer of that data can fetch that information and display it however they want. So whether it's on the LOL Esports website or within the broadcast, they can grab that information from AWS, inject it into their application or into their broadcast, and boom, all of a sudden you can show that on the screen or within your app.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that overview. And you hit it on a little bit too. My next question was going to be, how often is this updated?
Yeah. So right now we have it updating after every Riot operated tier 1 game of League of Legends. So I was very specific there because I've been reading the Reddit threads about our launch.
Oh, you never read Reddit, Nick.
You know what? I got thick skin, man. And I want to hear what the people have to say. And one of the questions on there was, what about TL's performance during EWC, right? Esports.
Yeah.
So I specifically said Riot operated tier 1 events. So we exclude things like the Esports World Cup. That said, that is when the model updates. When the rankings are published are a different story. Okay. And we went back and forth on this one, actually. So currently we have it configured to publish updates at the end of day during international play. So, day 1 of Swiss starts tomorrow. So at around 3 p.m. Pacific time is when the new update, the new rankings will go out. We played around with a couple of different ways of doing this here. So initially we thought that doing it after every game might be a little bit too frequent. We might not be able to see material differences in the ranking if we did it that frequently. Initially, we were thinking about doing it on a weekly basis. Because we weren't sure, for a V1 launch, it's in my nature to sort of de-risk the situation, and we wanted to align ourselves with something that I think fans and players would understand. A weekly cadence of updates is very similar to how the AP Top 25 does it for college football. We changed our minds on this, and for all of you that are watching out there thinking about getting into product or business, it is okay to change your mind. As so long as new information is presented to you. So be flexible, which we were here. Once we did some simulations of how the model performed using MSI data from earlier this year. So our mid-season invitational for 2024, we simulated the results of the power ranking service throughout using MSI match results data. And looking at it on a day-over-day basis, we saw some pretty interesting swings in the rankings there, which made us feel like, you know what? Let's go out with daily updates during Worlds, and let's see how the chatter progresses from there with any material big swings that we see. So look forward to any upsets and how that impacts the rankings.
Yeah, and I think you gave fans a great insight too. If you have any thoughts as the World Championships progress, just go to Reddit. And let Nick know. Let Nick know.
Let me know.
But why don't we take a look real quick? Let's talk about that fan reception. So I know I've got the website pulled up here, actually. Let me go ahead and share that. So this looks like the current global power rankings, if I'm correct. So let's talk about fan reception. Let's talk about kind of how you navigate this website. I mean, we can show people, you come here, what do you want to look for as a fan?
Yeah, I think a great way of using this throughout Worlds is checking what the schedule and what the run of show basically looks like for the next day. So tomorrow is Swiss day 1. The first matchup we have is BLG, Billy Gaming against Mad Lions, right? That's the first matchup. We're actually going to focus on the second matchup, which is Top Esports versus T1. So Top Esports is there at number 4. So if you give them a click, that'll pull out this side panel that gives you all of this interesting metadata about what was factored into the algorithm itself. So you can immediately see their win-loss record is up. They won nearly 75% of their matches this season. You can see their margin of victory by number of games they've won within those matches. You can also see their average strength of opponents. So you can see it's at 1392, which is quite high when you think about what the average power ranking is across all of our professional teams. It also gives you some insight into how they've performed at regional splits. So during summer, they placed 3rd. At MSI, they placed 5th. It also gives you insights into how they've been trending over the entire season. So this is personally one of my favorites. I've been using this a lot to get my pick'ems in there. Shout out to the pick'ems team. You can use power rankings to help you lock in your picks. Granted, the predictive power of this is not such that 100% of the time a team that is ranked higher is going to win. I mentioned this at the top. It's still a competition. There's still randomization involved. So when you look at this, you can see sort of all of this information around top esports. Then let's click into T1, who's there at number 6, that I've been catching a lot of flack for on Reddit, having them at number 6. But hey, when you look at this trend, I don't know. The data speaks for itself, guys. I'm as big a Faker fan as the next guy. But when you look at their trend over the course of the season, especially over the last couple of months, I mean, the line speaks for itself. Typically in business, we want to see things going up and to the right. Here, we're seeing it go down and to the right, which is unfortunate for them. But hey, tune in tomorrow to see how that actually plays out. If you scroll up a little bit in the side panel, I'm actually curious to see how their average strength of opponent shakes up. So look at that. On a season-long basis, they're playing teams that are ranked almost, I think,
the last.
Yeah, they're at 1410 as their average strength of opponent. I think top esports was somewhere in the 13s, 1392. So, maybe not as big a statistically significant difference between those two, but you can use this tool as a means of checking the schedule, checking their power ranking, looking at all this metadata, looking at the trend line, and coming up with your own determination. Like, hey, this team might have a lower win percentage, but their strength of opponent is so much higher than this other team that they're facing. Maybe that is what I'm going to anchor my pick'em around. Their strength of opponent being so high, I think they have a good chance against this team. That's how I would use this throughout Worlds, as a means of contextualizing the play that is coming up for the next day. When you think about, fan reception and how it's being used today, we see traffic spikes on this site at the conclusion of really pivotal games, so knockout games. So at the end of PSG, 100 Thieves, the other day we saw a nice big spike online. I expect to see a similar spike tomorrow
After top in
T1, and also at the end of the day of play. Because one thing that is different from play-ins versus Swiss, play-ins were best of 3s. These are best of 1s tomorrow. So I wouldn't expect huge swings, but there could be, if there's an upset between a team that's in the top 10 versus someone who's, closer to 40 to 50, expect a swing there.
Gotcha. All right, we got a couple questions in the chat here I want to make sure we answer. So first and foremost, currently this is just for League of Legends, right? It hasn't extended to Valorant yet.
That is true, although keep banging the table and bringing up, you want to see this for Valorant, and I'll be able to build it next year. If you guys keep saying you want it, we'll do it for you guys. That is how that's how we product plan over here. We really optimize around the player experience. So if you say you want it, it'll get done at some point.
Riot's ethos is player experience first. AWS is customer obsession. So those things come together, and
symmetry. Yeah. And then someone asked too, is there any sort of prediction or forecasting that this tool does, or is that something you're looking to add maybe in coming years potentially? Anything.
It's almost like they took a peek at our roadmap. So there is a world in which the two descriptive / borderline predictive models that we've created between win probability and global power rankings, there is a world in which those two play nicely together, and we can use the win expectancy calculation that's embedded within the power rankings model to inform win probabilities at the start of the game, so that they're not always starting 50-50. So what they're talking about is forward-looking inferences. This is something that we can explore next year. Take the survey and let us know that you want to see it. If there's a significant amount of responses in there that point in that direction, it's something that I will have to explore next year.
Perfect. So there you go. Chappy Goblin. There's your answer. You want some prediction and forecasting? Go fill out the surveys and let them know. They'll be reading them.